Welcome everybody to class. Today I'm going to be going over troubleshooting smartphones. And so this will relate to both iPhones as well as Androids. And so hopefully you guys can take something useful out of it. And a lot of smartphones I'm going to refer to as computers, because nowadays smartphones are really just computers that allow you to talk to people as well. And so they're essentially very related to one another. So a lot of the troubleshooting steps you're going to realize that they can correlate with computers, desktop and laptops as well too. All right, so on the agenda, we're going to go over the anatomy of a computer. So the physical components and whatnot that make up, that allow the unit to work. Common issues that arise from those parts, as well as how to troubleshoot those issues. And then next steps if troubleshooting those issues does not resolve problems. All right, cool. All right, so going over the anatomy of a computer, it's essentially two major parts. You have the hardware and software. So if you think about it, just like how we have organs and skeletons, and we have a mind that kind of like allows it to work together. There's physical components, and then there's digital components that allow the computer to work together. And so physical components would be stuff like processor, logic board, keyboard and mouse, battery and power supply, or camera and speakers. And then on the software side, you got operating systems, programs, apps that you download onto the unit, music, messages, and settings. And so hardware and software work together to make a computer come to life. And to put it, and basically, essentially what happens is the processor reads over the codes that are the operating system and programs and apps and allows it to work together. And without the codes, it's just glass and metal that's not going to do anything. Cool. Let's take a look. All right, so common issues that people experience all the time is, and you're going to notice actually a couple patterns with both categories. On the hardware side, display is unresponsive all the time, or cameras does not work all the time on every single app, or only charges in certain angles. On software side, you're going to notice that things happen on specific applications or in certain instances. And so, camera only works on certain applications. Email does not send when opening up an app, it just exits to the main menu. So you're going to notice it's a lot more specific. And issues that can be both are just like loops and cellular connectivity issues. And going over both of this, it's actually, before you even dive into troubleshooting, just a disclaimer, I would strongly recommend backing up your devices, because if it's a software issue, we're going to go over it a little bit in detail, but it requires us to delete a lot of information. And so if you want to protect your data, you want to make sure it's safe. Hardware issue-wise, if it's a physical part having a problem, we're going to replace those physical parts. And if anything goes wrong in the middle of the repair, actually, I'm going to work right after this. So there's this thing called ESD bands that technicians wear. And so ESD bands, ESD stands for electrostatic discharge. And what happens is, as you're walking around every day, you collect electricity and static. And every now and then you touch metal or you touch another person, and you're gonna notice the static go off. Well, if that ever happens on a computer board, that entire computer is done and out. You have to replace the whole thing. And so, if you get a new computer, you're gonna lose all your stuff. You wanna make sure everything is safe. Cool. All right. So the troubleshooting steps. You wanna take the most least invasive standpoint to the most invasive. We'll kind of go over that in detail, what I mean by that. But after a while with experience or with proper tools for diagnostics, you're going to notice, you're going to recognize what troubleshooting steps you need to take, so you might be able to skip a couple certain steps. And so it's 4 major steps essentially to troubleshooting your device. You're going to power cycle your unit, which is, you turn off the device, allow it to power back on. You could delete and re-download specific apps. So like, let's say Facebook isn't opening, or you notice that every time you're on Facebook, you type something, it takes a little while for it to open. You could try deleting that specific app and re-downloading it. And then you can update and reset the system, and lastly, restore the system. I'll kind of go over in detail what I mean by that. And all software issues will be resolved by restoring the system. Restoring the system is like the end-all, be-all. And however, backups can bring back issues. And to kind of go over the detail, so when a device doesn't work, so earlier we mentioned that hardware and software components work together to allow a computer to come to life. And so software is essentially, packages of codes, pages of codes that allow the computer to work together. And so if you delete, let's say Facebook's having an issue, whenever you have software issues, what it means is that those codes, it either has a mixed up or missing part. And so by deleting that and re-downloading it allows you to have a complete version of it and thus allow it to work. You can update the system because what that will do is if you have missing sections of codes, update will fill in the gaps, allowing you to keep the integrity of the device, keep the integrity of all your content, and it'll allow the device to work. And then lastly, you can restore the system, which essentially means you're completely deleting every single code inside your computer and allowing it to restore. And that's actually a little bit different than going to like your settings and deleting the device entirely, because if you do that, if you think about it, the phone powers back on its own. And so it has to keep a piece of that main code in order for it to power back on and reinitialize. By restoring the system through a computer or through a network, it allows you to completely get rid of that operating system as well too, and reinstall the information. Now, the reason why backups can bring back issues is because if you think about it, going back to the whole software analogy, everything that you have on your device is codes, right? And so when you make a backup, it saves all your codes. And if the issue is that it has incorrect coding, well, when you make a backup, it stays in its incorrect state. And so oftentimes what would happen is customers or consumers buy new phones, and what will happen is their older phone has had, let's say, like a display unresponsive issue. And they're like, all right, well, I'm having a problem, I'm just gonna buy a new phone. They'll buy a new device, reload their old backup, and they'll still continue to have a problem. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. According to Apple, according to last Apple's earnings report, we're selling about 12 million iPhones every 3 months. And so I can only imagine, how many of you guys out there are using smartphones. And now more than ever, it's integrated into our lives. So hopefully you guys can take something out of this session and help troubleshoot your own devices. Tyler.